it's going to be difficult to live up to what Prince just presented. It's incredibly moving for all of us in healthcare to see examples of how selfless commitment and passion that drives people to go out and serve those who are unfortunately do not have the access. So I would like to applaud Prince once again on behalf of all of us. So I'll shift gears and talk about innovation. And I come from an organization that has spent many years, and we often debate. I see here invent and innovate. This is an ongoing debate inside most corporations. What's the difference? When do we call it invention? When do we say it's innovation? So at Stryker, we settled it some years ago. And we said, when we are funding money to create an idea, we call it invention. So it's money going into a box which is just creating something. When the money starts coming out, when the idea starts delivering, we call it innovation. So that settles it for us, allows us to continue to invest money because we know it's going somewhere where one day it will produce results to generate funds which can help us innovate further and drive a vicious cycle. My relation with innovation, I became interested in this topic almost 20 years ago. I happened to meet at that time, relatively young professor, Christensen Clayton, who's done seminal work on innovation, and he wrote a book in '97 talking about innovator's dilemma. Why is it a dilemma? How do you start thinking about innovation? Most of the time, we see a current need, and then we try to solve that problem. Innovation, in our minds, is about identifying unstated needs and then solving and anticipating the problems. So the innovator's dilemma is, do you invest in today's problems or do you anticipate tomorrow's solutions? And at what pace do we do it? Because many times you can go ahead of the curve and start solving problems which will occur much later and then not be at the right timing. So Innovator's Dilemma, published in '97, was followed by Innovator's Solution and then later by Innovator's Prescription. So Christensen Clayton continues to write, and one of the most prolific professors around innovation. I would start with an example which perhaps most of us would relate with, and then come to the theme in a minute. Nobody uses a Walkman these days, but I grew up at a time when Walkmans were really something you wanted to acquire. The story is, and some of you may have heard this, but I'll say it anyways because it underscores the point I'm going to make. The story is that when Sony decided to make this device, they didn't know the name, of course. The chairman of the company had an idea and thought, this is something which might be interesting. So they commissioned a market research, went and asked people, what if you had a device that could allow you to listen to music when you were walking around? The first market research completely bombed. They said, this is a very crazy idea. Music is something you sit down, relax, and enjoy. We don't want anything that gives us music when we are walking. The chairman was persistent because he thought this is a good idea. It was his passion. He commissioned another market research. And he kept on doing it for several times. And every time it came back saying, this is not going to work. Finally, he said, I'm going to make it anyways. And that was the start of Sony Walkman, which I think in some ways changed the way we listen to music even today. So the point comes back to unstated needs and unstated requirements and anticipating something which customers often fail to state. So I'm going to show you a video right now and then talk a little bit more about what is Stryker doing at innovation.
Say hello to Mako. You may think you know Mako, but you don't know this Mako. Since 2006, more than 50,000 Mako partial knee procedures have been performed. Patient-specific preoperative planning enables more accurate implant positioning, and surgeon-controlled intraoperative adjustments can be made to optimize implant placement. Studies have shown Mako robotic arm-assisted PKA to be 2 to 3 times more accurate and 3 times more reproducible than manual partial knee arthroplasty. Mako robotic arm assisted PKA resulted in lower post-operative pain at 7 days and 92% patient satisfaction at 2 years. And since 2010, over 10,000 Mako total hip procedures have been performed. Mako Total Hip enables surgeons to more accurately plan components, potentially reducing variability within the THA procedure and allowing for enhanced functional and clinical outcomes. What will Mako do next? Introducing the Mako Total Knee with Triathlon. Now we have a key milestone in reconstructive surgery, the addition of the Mako Total Knee application with Stryker's market-leading Triathlon Total Knee system. The Mako Total Knee expands the current Mako offering to provide a comprehensive solution in the robotic arm-assisted reconstructive service line. The Mako Total Knee application was developed based on the Mako Partial Knee application. The 3 core features, enhanced planning, functional implant positioning, and robotic arm-assisted bone preparation, were adapted to enable a Mako Total Knee procedure with Triathlon. Enhanced planning. CT data is segmented to create a 3D model of the patient's bony anatomy. An individualized preoperative plan is then created, and the surgeon reviews the plan prior to the Mako procedure. Functional positioning. Surgeon-controlled intraoperative adjustments can be made to optimize implant placement. Robotic arm-assisted bone prep. The surgeon can then implement the individualized intra-op plan with robotic arm-assisted bone preparation. Because the total knee requires planar cuts, the burr for partial knee is replaced with the Stryker saw in the total knee application. As we continue to prepare for the commercial launch of the Mako Total Knee application, Stryker Orthopedics is actively partnering with surgeons and experts in product user experience to study the operating room workflow and learning curve of the Mako Total Knee application. The feedback from this limited market release will provide us with the opportunity to converge on a single workflow to allow every surgeon using the Mako Total Knee application the opportunity to reduce complexity and experience simpler and more reproducible procedures.
The healthcare landscape is consistently evolving. Stryker is committed to partnering with our customers to bring innovative solutions for our patients. Mako robotic arm-assisted surgery is a great example of our collaboration and high degree of innovation.
So, say hello to Mako.
Orthopedic surgeons here, so this was not meant to run a commercial for Mako. I apologize up front if this felt like that. But I wanted to highlight a few points here. What does Mako do? It places the implant more precisely, it reduces pain, it makes it more precise, 2 to 3 times more accurate. When we ask our surgeon, what do we need? They would often tell us, I need a new implant design. But do you think the procedure accuracy could improve? Oh no, I'm good. I have done thousands of these procedures. They all work very fine. But the fact is, data would tell us, if we look at empirical data, that the precisions still do not exist. The human capability to place an implant, to cut a bone, has still limitations. And this precision can be achieved much better with technology. So Mako is our answer. When we first designed Mako and tested it with surgeons, they absolutely rejected it. In the first design, the surgeon was made redundant. Surgeons would look at a computer screen, select the surgical plan, press a button and stand aside, and the robot would do the surgery. Now that was not acceptable to many surgeons, and I can understand why. So we've now got a revised design which allows the surgeon to participate with the robot, and there's a haptic feedback. But the end result is more precise surgeries, as well as making sure you saw the patient satisfaction, 92%. These scores, we believe, over the years will transform because of the principle we use in our innovation. And I'll come to the principle in a second. In a slide, we'll switch from Stryker to a completely different example. So here's the problem, 2.5 billion people in the world. This data is a bit dated, but the fact still remains. 2.5 billion people in the world still don't have a bank account, but 50% of this population has a mobile phone. Identify. So somebody paid attention to the fact that all these people have money, they have a mobile phone, and they perhaps need a banking solution. Invent is around creating solutions. You could discover a completely different idea, or you could borrow a technology to create and enhance a solution which helps these 2.5 billion people. The result of this experiment, this is done in a country called Kenya. It is not in the United States, not in Europe, not where R&D is funded to an extent where millions of dollars go in. In 4 years, 70% of adult Kenyan population had a bank account. Kenya used to be a British colony, so there were 115 years of banking history had created just 1,500 ATMs. So a point very close to what Prince was saying. How do you serve these people? And I'm sure, in 2011 alone, I haven't followed up. They had done 10 billion worth transactions in Kenya. Very good. We see it here now. The M-Pesa application was actually designed in Kenya many years ago because somebody, I think the issue starts here. How do you identify the gap? Because the customer, the guys who had mobile phones and did not have a bank account, didn't show up to say, hey, I need a bank account. But they were a walking message for those who could figure out that if they have a mobile phone and they have money, they could benefit from a bank account. And not only did they benefit, I think it led to development of Kenya's economy and all of the other factors. So this Safaricom was the company which was later acquired, I think, by one of the Indian telecom providers. And this platform is used widely across the world. But the innovation, the money out of the idea came from a country like Kenya, not typically known for invention or innovation. So I just wanted to share a very different example. I'll state a few more of our closer to home examples that I can comfortably talk about. And I'll take India. You saw in this video that surgeons were using some tools to cut the bone or drill holes in the bone. In India, we have similar needs when a joint surgery or an arthroplasty surgery procedure is done or a trauma procedure is done. Stryker has been in India for over 20 years. What we find is Indian surgeons, those who work in large corporate hospitals, would have access to technology from Stryker or our competitors, get the best possible tool. The ones who are setting up their own hospitals would often be constrained for capital, and their patients themselves would not have the ability to pay. So they would, in many cases, use an electric drill, which is meant to drill holes in the wall. They would use that on the bone. It's a reality. Now, obviously, this tool that is used to drill hole in a wall is not the best suited to work on your bone. For this surgeon, the next step from this inexpensive machine, so you could compare it to a bicycle, the next step was a Mercedes that a Stryker would sell. There was nothing in between. We spent a lot of time in the market understanding that there is a need. We identified that. We then came to the invent principle and said, how could we solve it? Stryker is already making these Mercedes. We understand how to make these tools, but obviously they cannot serve the needs of this segment of the market. So what we did was, I think we as Indians have a gene in us which drives us to frugality. Someday it will be discovered, but I believe it very passionately. So we put a bunch of Indian engineers who are part of our global technology center and said, just look at this and tell us what could you do. So the first thing they did was they looked at the casing of the power tool and said, this one is actually machined by all the Mercedes manufacturers to assure certain tolerances. But if we casted it, it will bring down the cost dramatically. We lose out on the tolerance, but we don't think that will have an impact on the clinical outcome. So as we started getting these ideas, which was in the invention mode, we said, okay, let's do one thing. Let's set the parameters right. Patient safety doesn't get compromised. The ability to conduct a procedure, certain kinds of procedures, let's understand what's the torque needed, what's the force needed, what's the functionality needed, let's fix that. Within those parameters, go do what you like. So they figured that we could actually cast the casings and bring down the cost dramatically. The second thing they figured out is every time a surgeon uses this tool, it actually goes into an autoclave, and we boil all the electronics inside, which drives up the cost of the electronic components. We need very rugged components which can withstand over 100 degrees Celsius multiple times. They said, what if we did not have to boil these components after every procedure? What they did was they created a 2-module power tool. The casing gets sterilized, it's made of metal, but the electronics actually comes out of the procedure and doesn't need to be sterilized. So did two things, brought down the cost of the electronics that is needed to put in, because we could now use standard electronics instead of high-cost electronics. Also brought down the cost of maintenance, because no matter what you do, whenever you boil electronics, it's going to get bad. With these two, just these two ideas, we went to the implementation. And we said, we've got this figured out now, what do we do to make sure it's going to work? We sent this whole design up to the US team to say, we want this to pass the test of fire as it would for the Mercedes. So we are moving away from making a Mercedes, but we still want to get a Toyota. So the quality systems were validated by the guys who've been making Mercedes for all these years. They came back, pushed us around. It's been a journey of 3 years, and we are now in the final stage. 2 weeks ago on a Sunday here in Bangalore at the MS Ramaiah lab, we invited about 20 odd surgeons, some from India, some from outside, and we gave these tools in their hands and set them in this cadaver lab and said, implant a few hips, put in a few knees, do a few trauma procedures, and come back and tell us, how does this work? So over 2 days we did this program and we recorded their notes. For me, it was personally very gratifying to see that we are finally moving to a point where we can meet the middle need. The guy who's riding on a bicycle can go up to a Toyota and stretch and afford something which will lead to a patient benefit eventually. So these surgeons came back and said, yeah, but it's a little bit heavy. Also, it doesn't have the oscillating function. Yes, and we are missing this. And we stopped them and said, this is not the Mercedes. Go back to the days when you were riding a bicycle. Now compare it then. Oh, it works. It works because we saw these different knees and hip procedures going in. It is probably not better than the best, but it is good enough. So our mindset, and this is the cycle we followed for this power tool, which is now validated. We are now going to manufacturing. We also realize we have a factory in China which does a very good job of manufacturing Mercedes. We brought them to manufacture Toyotas. We have the design, and now hopefully this year this tool will be launched here in India. And that's the beginning of how we are identifying the needs, inventing using technologies that we already have, and then implementing and giving solutions that will get the idea to deliver commercial success. The other example I would share with you is that of a bed, a hospital bed, and it's for most of us, at least when I started in devices, I said a bed is a bed, what can it do for a patient? But there are many features which you need to have in a bed in case the patient needs to be brought in a head-up position. There are different functionalities in a bed. And Stryker again was making a bed which was not even a Mercedes, it was Rolls-Royce. If you went to Ram's hospital, he would look at it and say, it looks very nice, but throw us out very quickly, because the segment and the value, which what we need, again, it's the ad which used to show up last year in the Maruti, and I think that truly defines the Indian spirit when we are buying anything. Kitna deti hai? So even if any of us bought a Mercedes, we'll still ask the dealer to give us free foot mats. So that's our mentality. We will always be there, and I think it's a blessing for all of us. The beds, that what we did again was to look at the bed and say, what does the customer need? Is it good enough? We don't have to be better than the best in everything. And that's the big need emerging markets and countries like India have, which are well served by just observing. I'll give you another example from Stryker. I don't want to sound like a commercial advertisement for Stryker, but these are examples that fascinate me. Inside an operating theater, what does the surgeon face? In addition to running the procedure, which has its own set of technical challenges, there's a lot of pollution. Smoke, burning bone and flesh, fluids. And these are real risks which would cause infections, which also actually lower the efficiency of the operating theater, because once surgical procedure is done, you need to clean up and get the surgical theater prepared again. Many of our engineers were standing into surgeries for all these years because we have presence in different segments. And they kept observing this, and they talked to surgeons and say, is this really a problem? I said, yeah, it's really a problem. We don't know what to do with it. So these engineers went back and started designing a system. The problem actually was very simple. Just get rid of the smoke and the body fluids and make the OT turn around faster. And this invention is not very big. You just need some suction devices. So they created a machine called the Neptune, which did not exist in the world. FDA did not know what to do with it, how to approve it. Since there were no classification, we started installing these machines. They're very simple suction devices. They take out all the smoke. take out of the body fluids, and at the end of the theater, bring down the manual labor required, as well as the time required for turning around an OT by almost 50%. So about 200 of these machines got installed in different US hospitals until, in our industry, the other side of this is regulation, until there was an accident, a human error, where the instruction for use had missed out one bullet, which caused a serious adverse event. The US FDA woke up and said, what is this machine? I said, this is what this machine is. But you didn't seek our approval. You didn't have a category to find this approval because nobody thought of it. So now you have to withdraw all these machines back. And we'll figure out what category under which this will be approved in future, but for now, take them back. And the story is we went back to these hospitals and said, we need the machines back, the US FDA is asking us to. They said, we can't give them back. Our OT efficiencies have now tuned to Neptune. And if we give these machines back to you, our hospital costs are going to balloon. He said, we don't have a choice, the FDA is asking us. They signed liability forms and held us harmless to keep the machine despite the FDA ban. So the reason I share these examples is these needs always exist. For me personally, the biggest element of any innovation lies in correct identification. The middle part is easier. Technology has evolved in different fields. We don't invent any technology that we use today, we borrow it. We borrow it from the mobile companies, we borrow it from people who are making video screens, but once we identify what's needed, we bring it back into action. And the implementation, again, is perhaps as challenging as identifying. Because when you solve a new problem, somebody has to change their mind in the way they're going to operate. That is a bigger challenge of if somebody is used to doing a thing in a certain way, that presents a huge challenge. How do you implement this? Now, I talked all this about the power tool that we made. When we go back to the market, I anticipate many of the surgeons are going to say, no, the other one is much better. Of course it is. But then you have to change your mindset. It's okay. This is heavier, but it's more cost effective. And we similarly innovated on the bed that I was beginning to talk about. We took the bed apart, looked at various features, made what's now called a Stryker value bed, which is about a third, 30% or 50% of what we would sell the Rolls Royce at. And these beds are already in the market. Customers recognize that it is, we identified the problem right, and we are implementing it in terms of delivering a value solution. So India is all about innovation. I think we have to constantly innovate just to stay in the same place, given the size of our population, given the size of our challenges that we have. I live in Gurgaon, where power fails every day 6 to 8 hours, and it gave birth to an industry called inverters. So you put a bunch of batteries, a bit of electronics, and now these inverters power the whole house. We can run air conditioning, practically everything in the house, and the inverters were born. So in India, we don't need a whole lot to innovate. I think our frugal mindset and the plethora of challenges and great talent that exists in the country, we're constantly innovating. The trick lies in creating this into a commercial success and making sure that the idea starts generating something which is helpful to the society, to our patients, and also funds us back to do more research. So thank you. I'll pause here. Thank you.
Why does it not work when I'm holding the mic? Few questions?
There is no attempt to hog the limelight. Fabulous work in innovation done, as I said, in technology. But the reality is we did a dipstick test in our hospital and went back to patients and said, you have had this high-end technology doing this and this for you. And you know, the entire feedback was all about how did the nurse take the IV peripheral line? How was the dressing changed? So here you have one end of the spectrum, and this is what I said. We are not innovating and investing in our people to match the strides which you are taking. So what happens is you get forgotten, and this person only remembers how bad the phlebotomist was, or how many pricks were given to take the peripheral line, or how that junior doctor did not know how to do the dressing. And then you have this huge disconnect where Stryker goes out of the window and this is all you hear about. This is where I repeatedly say we are not innovating in terms of the skill sets of our people, particularly below the physician level. That is a segment we just take it for granted it's going to happen. And that is the one segment the consumer can touch and feel. He knows nothing about your technology. He does not know about it. But this he will definitely go back, or she will go back, and they cane us for it. And this is when I ask the question, why are we not innovating in this? We are not keeping stride with the infrastructure and technology. And this is where I think a lot of innovation has to go in. Otherwise, there's this huge mismatch.
I couldn't agree with you more, Ram. I think it is, this is more glamorous. This is up there where you can see a robot is doing a surgery. But unless we fix the basics, and this is particularly true here, I think we neglect this. And fundamentally behind this, and this is my philosophy, may or may not be true, is the quality and the level of care that we expect and deliver is very different. The expectations of our patients, it's changing very fast. People who are exposed and they're living in upper strata of society, they would come back and demand a quality of care, but for a vast majority, just getting treated is good enough. How do we get our skill sets to rapidly grow? And this is not going to take a whole lot of money, it's not going to take a whole lot of technology. It will just take a change in mindset where people start believing in care as an important parameter of delivering healthcare. So I could not agree more with you.
Can I just ask one quick one? I quite like that, that you are trying to serve a category which probably didn't exist in India. And I think that's the major bulk. That's the middle income, which probably would, So is that a considered decision that this would be in these kinds of countries that you will create new innovations and technologies, number one? And how easy, difficult you think is this Make in India business which is going on, because medical technology is about 80% imported, if I'm not mistaken. So is there any effort that you have already shared once? Is there a serious effort towards that?
Sure. So I'll answer both the questions. While we are doing these innovations today, our company believes we will be very soon, and I'm sure we have GE talking afterwards. They will talk about much more. They are far advanced. Our company firmly believes that these solutions will go back to our global markets. So you can consider us here as the crucible where we are taking the company from a Mercedes to a Toyota, but these Toyotas will run everywhere. Given the healthcare pressures everywhere and the pricing pressure and the excise tax, this solution will be very helpful. So it's a considered experiment to do it here, take it to China, Brazil, all these countries, and then bring it back. Because bringing it back to some of these economies will also require a long regulatory pathway. So we are mindful and cognizant of that. In our designs, we have incorporated these pieces. So when we are ready, we will take them back to the regulatory pathway to the developed countries. Your other question was Make in India. Now, I firmly believe that unless we make in India, we will not be able to serve this market. If you look at any company that is successful anywhere in the world, they have a dominant position in the local market where they are born. So without manufacturing, we will not get there. Having said this, our first step at Stryker is create in India or design in India. We do not have the same quality of talent in designing and creation as we have elsewhere. So China has an R&D lab for Stryker, but these engineers, first because of English-speaking capabilities, and second, their mindset are much faster. So they deliver designs which are frugal, which work, and they're constantly, and at a pace at which they work. This is fantastic. For us at Stryker, we have large manufacturing capacities existing across 23 countries. So for us to come to Make in India will be some more time because those capacities are still unutilized. But again, if we are talking about making beds and heavy equipment, I see that will start happening in India in the next course of time. The government's initiative to promote and push some pretty harsh measures in terms of including duties will yield results where people will start and will have to make in India to serve the market.
Thank you, Mr. Malhotra. So the take-home is that we all buy Toyotas and not Mercedes. May I request Dr. Ram to please hand over the momentum to Mr. Malhotra?
Thank you.